Welcome back to Face to Face. Well, you've just heard the views of the Shooters Association. Now it's the turn of an outspoken critic of the gun lobby, Associate Professor Simon Chapman from the University of Sydney. Welcome to the program. You've heard what Ted Drain had to say. He said he thinks John Howard's reaction is far too quick, hasn't been thought through, and basically I think he's saying it's just not going to work.
He would say that, wouldn't he, as Mandy Rice Davies once said. Far too quick. Medical groups, public health groups, criminology groups, domestic violence groups have been calling for John Howard's minimalist position for years and years now, and if it's far too quick for John Howard to be acting after last Sunday's events, he's using a different sort of language to me, speaking a different language altogether.
But he has got a point, doesn't he? I mean, there's millions of these firearms out there. If we're now going to ban them, where does that leave people who have got them? And I mean, how do you track them down if we don't know where they are?
There will be a call, as I understand it, for gun registration, and there will be shooters out there who will decide to register their guns, and obviously there will be some who will decide that they won't register their guns. But this scheme won't work unless it's introduced with, I think, what can only be described as draconian penalties for refusing to do this. In Japan, for example, I understand that they have such tough gun laws over there that if a person is carrying a firearm in public, they can be fined $15,000. If they discharge a firearm in public, it's life imprisonment. The interesting thing is that...
Would you like to see that here?
I don't know if I would go that far, but I believe that the gun penalties that we have here, the way in which people like Mr. Drain can talk about the number of people who will just simply ignore the law, would seem to indicate that there is a feeling amongst shooters that it's really not too important, that it's quite an easy thing to sort of not bother about licensing or registration. I think also Mr. Drain is in the business of talking up the number of people involved in shooting in Australia. He said that there were 2 to 3 million shooters by his estimation in this country. Now, we only have 12 million adults, so what he's trying to suggest is that 1 in 4 of people like us are gun owners, and that's absolute nonsense if I can be blunt about it.
Mr. Chapman, can I ask you, should the National Code include a ban on mail orders? How important is it to look at that aspect?
I think, obviously, I mean, mail order doesn't allow the checking of a person thoroughly. I mean, this is a situation which prevails at the moment. There are advertisements in magazines, you know, Queensland and Tasmania. It's ridiculous that these weapons that were used last week down in Tasmania can be available through such situations.
Looking for common ground here, Ted Drain has proposed a list of prescribed persons based on medical histories and histories of domestic violence, etc. Would you support that idea?
No, I wouldn't at all. This is a favourite fallback position of the gun lobby. It argues that if we can only identify people such as the perpetrator last week, then all will be well, the doctors will cooperate and so forth. What I would say first of all is that doctors already notify firearms authorities if they have patients who they believe are dangerous to the community, just as they notify the roads and traffic people if they have, for example, a person with very poor vision who insists on driving, or an epileptic who insists on driving, that sort of thing. If we look at the number of people who've been killed in Australia and New Zealand in the last 10 years in mass shootings, there have been 116 deaths. Now, of those people, the perpetrators, the people who killed them, there were 14 individuals involved. But of those 116, 80% of the people were killed by somebody who had no history of mental illness whatsoever, and 87% had no criminal record. So if we start adopting solutions which says that it's people who are unhinged, who have some sort of mental health problem, it's only going to deal with the tip of the iceberg.
Well, Professor, could you give us some indication then about what the minimum outcomes you want, that you want from Friday's summit, and what are the penalties that you'd like to see apply?
Quickly, Simon.
I think that John Howard's minimalist position is a minimalist position. We don't want lifetime licences anymore. And I think that we also need to address very, very strongly the definition of who could own a rifle.
All right, we might pick up that point. We have to take a break. Stay with us. Back very soon.